Hey friends, welcome back to the Spooky Files. If you're returning, thank you so much for coming back. And if you're new, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I'm your host, Mary Ellen Quigley. This is where we take a dive into the paranormal, the unexplained, the I swear I saw something, but I don't want to admit it moments that we all have and now have a place to talk about them. Today's episode is called Encounters on the Water. Now, we are taught to think of water as calming, peaceful, and relaxing. In fact, my favorite places in the world are beaches, ponds, rivers, any place where there's a body of water. And if I'm planning a vacation, there's usually a body of water somewhere involved in my vacation planning, like I'm sure so many of us do. Water is some of the most calming and peaceful places you can go to unwind and relax. But water is also one of the most deceptive environments that we have. If you think about it, water reflects things that aren't there, it hides depth, it swallows sound, and unlike buildings or roads, water doesn't leave evidence behind. No footprints, no markings, no explanations. That's why mysteries that happen on the water often just stay mysteries because they are so difficult to solve. Today's stories come from people who had experiences on or near the water that just didn't make sense. These are the kind of experiences that end with more questions than answers, and even more questions will come to the surface every time you're near the shoreline. So take a deep breath, grab a cup of coffee, and let's get into it. Our first story is the swimmer who never came up for air, and this one comes from a person who wishes to remain anonymous. They write, "Hi, Mary. This happened a few summers ago while my partner and I were staying at a rental cabin on a large lake. It was the kind of place where you go to unplug, which was exactly what we needed after a really difficult year. That evening, we were sitting on the dock just before sunset. The lake was calm. There were no wind, no waves, and not even very many insects skimming on the surface, which was weird for late summer. That's when we noticed someone swimming far out. At first, I didn't register it as strange because we were on a lake, and people swim out farther than they should all the time, especially when the water is as calm as it was that day. But after a minute or two, my partner said, 'Do you think they're okay?' The swimmer was moving, but something felt wrong about the rhythm. There was no splashing, no pause, no stopping to float on their back or to take a break. They just kept going. Just arms breaking the surface in slow mechanical strokes like they were swimming in a race. And that's when I realized that I hadn't seen their head come up once. We both stood up on the dock, trying to get a better angle. The swimmer kept going forward, arms cycling again and again, but their head never surfaced. No breath, no gasp, no sign of strain. Minutes passed, and I kept thinking, that person should be exhausted by now. How are they not coming up for air? Then the arms stopped. Not suddenly, but gradually, like they were slowing down. The water went completely still, and we waited for them to pop back up to the surface to take that deep breath. But they didn't. No bubbles, no rippling, nothing. They just disappeared. We waited another minute, convinced that they would surface any second, and they didn't. That's when we called for help. Police came out, search boats came, we gave statements, and they asked around the other houses on the lake. We stayed up all night waiting for news. They found nothing. No missing person was reported, no belongings were found, no explanation was offered. I still think about the way that swimmer moved, like breathing was optional, and I don't think that we saw a person at all. I'm pretty sure what we saw was a ghost swimmer. So that is definitely freaky, and I agree with them. That had to have been a ghost swimming because obviously, if it was a person, there would be a missing persons report or a body that popped up somewhere. So the fact that there was nothing tells me that they didn't actually see a real person. But it also brings up a lot of questions, one of which for me would be, did someone drown in the lake? Is this ghost reliving their last moments? Like maybe they weren't able to come up for air and that's why they're still swimming in the lake all these years later. And I would love for this person to let me know where this happened because I'm assuming that by police and search boats being called out that this probably made the news somewhere, which makes it even more interesting. But thank you so much for sharing this story. I would definitely be creeped out by that. And also the lack of insects and stuff in late summer by a lake. Just the whole situation is creepy. So I want to hear more about it. All right, let's move on to the next one. Story 2 is called The Boat Lantern That Followed Me, and this one came from Mark. And Mark says that he spent most of his life on the water. He writes, I have fished the same lake for over 20 years. I know the shoreline by memory. I know this lake like the back of my hand. That night, I was out just after sunset. There was no moon yet, and there was no other boats. And that's when I saw the lantern. It wasn't drifting or bobbing. It sat low on the water and was steady and calm, which I thought was weird because usually boat lanterns or buoys would bob up and down with the water. At first, I thought maybe someone had lost their lantern. And then I realized it was moving. Every time I adjusted course, the lantern adjusted with me, always keeping the same distance behind me. And it didn't respond to my wake. It didn't tilt or sway. And again, it wasn't bobbing. It followed. I tried speeding up, then slowing down, then cutting the engine. And no matter what I did, the lantern or light or whatever this was followed me exactly in the same pattern. I radioed the Coast Guard. While I was talking, I glanced back. The lantern vanished. No fade, no dimming, just gone. And the Coast Guard that I spoke to said they didn't see any lights out on the lake and that there was no one out there with an emergency light that they knew of. I packed up and left. And if I'm being completely honest, I don't fish at night very much anymore. So if I'm being 100% transparent here, I don't know a lot about boating and being out on lakes with lights and stuff. I know that buoys will sometimes have lights because number one, you don't want to run into them. But also, I know there are lighthouses, but the emergency lantern, I think, is what I'm a little bit confused on because I don't understand how that works. So, if they're sending out a rescue boat, I'm assuming they have like an emergency lantern. Is that kind of what he's referring to? I'm not 100% sure. If you know more about boating, let me know because I would love to be educated. But regardless of whether this was an emergency lantern or like a ghost light of some kind, the fact that it was following him around the lake is definitely creepy. And no matter how hard I tried, I don't think I could have relaxed and settled back into fishing. So I get him packing up and running for the hills and be like, I'm done fishing for tonight. But thank you to Mark for sharing that story. That's definitely scary. All right, this one is interesting because it could happen to any of us who love beach vacations. We could totally have had this same experience, which is what drew my attention to it. And story number 3 is called Footsteps in the Sand, and it comes from another person who wishes to remain anonymous. They say, Hi, Mary. I walk the same beach almost every morning just after sunrise. I am lucky enough to live near the beach. It's quiet, the sand is smooth and untouched, and it's one of my favorite morning rituals. One morning, I noticed footprints, barefoot, adult sized, leading straight toward the water. It caught my attention because the way the water was hitting the beach, these footprints should have been pretty quickly removed. But when I looked around, there were no shoes, no return trail, and I didn't see a person. I also didn't see anyone in the water. The footprints stopped right at the water line where the water goes up onto the sand. So again, there shouldn't have been any footprints. After a couple of laps of water, they should have been erased, and yet they were still there. I waited a few minutes thinking that maybe the person was out swimming in the water and I would see them surface after a while or see them further down the beach. But minutes passed and I still didn't see anyone. I was the only person on the beach. I thought about reporting it and having someone search the area, but I felt silly because I had never seen an actual person, and just because I saw footprints didn't actually mean there was any kind of emergency happening. So I finished my walk, walked back, the footprints were still there, and I went home and didn't think much else of it. The next morning, when I went to take my usual morning walk, the footprints were gone. But a couple of weeks later, I saw them again. Same size, same direction, still no return prints, and no one else on the beach. I don't know what's going on, but I feel like there has to be something paranormal. Could there be a ghost person walking into the water? I'm not sure. I don't even know that this is paranormal, but it's definitely weird. It's not normal, and I wanted to share and hear what your listeners think it could be. So I agree with this person that I probably think this is paranormal. The thing that makes me think so is that, as we all know, just if you've been to a beach long enough or you've been on the ocean or something like that, when the water comes up and hits the sand, it should be removing whatever imprints are there. In fact, when I was a little girl and my dad would take us up to Lake Michigan to go swimming at the beach, that was one of my favorite things to do, would be to write things in the sand or to make handprints and footprints and then watch the waves come and knock them out and start all over. So it's weird to me that those footprints just kind of stayed there for several minutes and didn't go anywhere. And the fact that there was no one around. So I'm leaning towards paranormal, and I'm wondering if anybody else has ever had an experience like this, or is there potentially a scientific reason as to why the sand would not have removed those footprints? Like, is there some kind of, I don't know, scientific thing that would make the sand not wash away? I would love to hear from you guys. If you have any ideas, leave it in the comment section below. And that brings us to the end of episode 9 of the Spooky Files, Encounters on the Water. Can you guys believe we are already 9 episodes in? So if you are listening along and you haven't said hi yet, leave a ghost emoji or a thumbs up or something to let me know you're there. I'm so appreciative of all of your support so far. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. Follow me on social media. Leave a comment because I love hearing from all of you. If you have a story that you would like me to share on the podcast, you can send an email to the spookyfilespodcast@gmail.com or send me a message on social media. I read every single email or message, and it helps us build a community of people who don't just love spooky stories, but also want a safe space to talk about all the things we don't always want to admit out loud. Make sure to follow or subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. If you're looking for more paranormal content, check out my other podcast, Who's Your Myths and Legends, What You Do with My Sister, and we talk about all the spooky things from the state of Indiana. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and keep it spooky, my friends.